Hello, everybody. Welcome back. So, last episode, we talked about Ezra chapter 4, and it talked about King Darius and Artaxerxes, and it kind of went back and forth throughout the timeline, but it ended when the rebuilding of the Temple of God resumed in the second year of King Darius's reign. So now we're continuing from that part of the story into chapter 5. And let's get started. So, chapter 5, verse 1, it says, "At that time the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, son of Iddo, prophesied to the Jews in Judah and Jerusalem. They prophesied in the name of God of Israel, of the God of Israel, who was over them. Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, son of Jehozadak, responded by starting again to rebuild the temple of God in Jerusalem. The prophets of God were with them and helped them." So this is saying that these prophets named Haggai and Zechariah were preaching to the Jews and that were helping them rebuild the temple. Then verse 3 goes on to say, "But Tattenai, governor of the province west of the Euphrates River, and Shethar-Bozenai and their colleagues soon arrived in Jerusalem and asked, 'Who gave you permission to rebuild this temple and restore this structure?' They also asked for the names of all the men working on the temple. But because their God was watching over them, and the leaders of the Jews were not prevented from building until a report was sent to Darius and he returned his decision. So Tattenai and his people came to Jerusalem. They're from west of the Euphrates River. They were like, 'Hey, who gave you permission to build this temple? What's your names?' And pretty much wanted to stop them from rebuilding the temple, but God said, 'Hey, I got you guys. Y'all are safe.' So he wasn't able to stop them until he was able to get a letter from King Darius. So now he's about to try to get this letter from King Darius telling them to stop building the temple of God. So then verse 6 goes on to say, this is a copy of the letter that Tattenai the governor, Shethar-Bozenai, and the other officials of the province west of the Euphrates River sent to King Darius. So this is going to be Tattenai's letter to King Darius. I summarized it and I said, Tattenai writes a letter to Darius that says that he questioned the Jews, and they told him they're the people of God and are rebuilding the temple, and King Cyrus gave them permission and said to give back their stuff from Nebuchadnezzar, because Nebuchadnezzar took their stuff from the temple whenever he destroyed their city and temple and all that stuff. And then Sheshbazzar laid the foundations of the temple. And Tattenai requests that a search is made to see if all of this stuff is true. And then that's the end of chapter 5. And it goes on to chapter 6, which is Darius's letter back to Tattenai. And so this is what it says in verse 1. "So King Darius issued orders that a search be made in the Babylonian archives, which were stored in the treasury. But it was found at the fortress of Ecbatana in the province of Media that a scroll was found." So he issued something to be found in the treasury, but it actually wasn't there, it was somewhere else. And this is what it said. It says, "In the first year of King Cyrus's reign, a decree was sent out concerning the temple of God at Jerusalem. Let the temple be rebuilt on the site where Jews used to offer their sacrifices using the original foundations." And then he goes on to tell them how it should be built. Verse 5 says, "Furthermore, the gold and silver cups which were taken to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar from the temple of God in Jerusalem must be returned to Jerusalem and put back where they belong. Let them be taken back to the temple of God." So this is the letter that King Cyrus wrote that they had found in the province of Media. It was a scroll, and it's saying that this was in the first year of King Cyrus's reign. He told them to rebuild the temple. He told the Jews to rebuild the temple, and he told them to get their gold and silver cups that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from them originally, and he said, take those back and put them back in your temple of God. And so then King Darius sent this message to Tattenai. I summarized it, and King Darius replies and says, do not disturb them, stay away from them. And then he's like, actually, never mind. You need to help them rebuild it and pay for everything. So you have to pay for everything, basically. And give them tons of animals to sacrifice. And if you don't, I will impale you with a beam from your house. Which is crazy. But basically at first he's like, stay away from them. What? No. Cyrus said that they can rebuild this temple, let them do their thing. And then he's like, never mind. Actually, you need to help them. And if you don't help them, then I'm going to kill you. Because you want to complain. So basically don't complain about God. That's what I got from that. Anyways, so then in verse 13, it says, Tattenai, governor of the province west of the Euphrates River, and Shethar-Bozenai and their colleagues complied at once with the command of King Darius. So the Jewish elders continued their work, and they were greatly encouraged by the preaching of the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, son of Iddo. So Tattenai and his people like, okay, we'll listen because we don't want to be impaled by a beam from our own house, and then our house get destroyed. That would be terrible. So we're just going to listen to you. And then it talks about how the Jewish elders continued their work, and they were greatly encouraged by the preaching of the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, which were mentioned in the beginning of chapter 5, verse 1. It says, at that time the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, son of Iddo, prophesied to the Jews in Judah and Jerusalem. They prophesied in the name of the God of Israel who was over them. So there's a little mention right there. And then it goes on to say, the temple was finally finished, as had been commanded by the God of Israel and decreed by Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, kings of Persia. The temple was completed on March 12th during the 6th year of King Darius's reign. I don't know if March 12th is the real date as to when it was finished, because this is NLT. It's not a true old document or manuscript, whatever. It's not one of the oldest Bibles, so it's not as reliable as some of the older ones. And I know that they had much different calendars back then. It might be the right time, but you can't really rely on it. Anyways, but it was during the 6th year of King Darius's reign whenever they finished building the temple. And if we look back at chapter 4, verse 24, it goes on to say that it was, and it remained at a standstill until the 2nd year of the reign of King Darius of Persia. So they started rebuilding it the 2nd year, and they finished it the 6th year. So it took 4 years for them to rebuild this temple. Verse 16 goes on to say, the temple of God was then dedicated with great joy by the people of Israel, the priests, the Levites, and the rest of the people who had returned from exile. During the dedication ceremony for the temple of God, 100 young bulls, 200 rams, and 400 male lambs were sacrificed, and 12 male goats were presented as a sin offering for the 12 tribes of Israel, aka Jacob's offspring. Verse 18 then says, then the priests and Levites were divided into their various divisions to serve at the temple of God in Jerusalem, as prescribed in the book of Moses. So basically, they gave them animals to sacrifice because earlier King Darius was like, if you don't, I'm going to impale you and kill you. So they gave them the animals, and then the priests and Levites got jobs at the temple of God. So then it goes on to say in verse 19, on April 21st, remember we aren't too sure if these dates are accurate or not, but they're probably somewhere around the right time. Anyways, on April 21st, the returned exiles celebrated Passover. The priests and Levites had purified themselves and were ceremonially clean. So they slaughtered the Passover lamb for all the returned exiles, for their fellow priests, and for themselves. And then verse 22 says, Then they celebrated the festival of unleavened bread for 7 days. There was great joy throughout the land, because the Lord had caused the king of Assyria to be favorable to them, so that he helped them to rebuild the temple of God, the God of Israel. So basically the Jews celebrate the Passover for all the returned exiles and the festival of unleavened bread, and then God blesses them. So God blesses them because they have been super faithful to God. This is a message. This is like, hey, if you're really faithful to God, He will bless you. And so yeah, that's something good you need to hear. And that is the end of chapter 6. So to give a summary over chapters 5 and 6, basically what happens is Tattenai comes into Jerusalem and is like, hey, are y'all supposed to be doing all this? I don't think so. He tries to stop them. God doesn't allow that to happen. So then Tattenai goes to King Darius and is like, hey, these people are rebuilding the temple and they claim to be people of God, and he's just complaining. So then King Darius replies to that message and is like, hey, actually, King Cyrus said that they should rebuild the temple. Now leave them alone, or else I'm going to kill you. Pretty much, if you don't help them rebuild the temple, then I'm going to kill you. And they're like, okay, fine, we'll help them. So then they help them rebuild the temple. The temple is completed during the 6th year of King Darius's reign. And then they provide all the animals for the sacrificing. And then boom, they all the Jews celebrate for the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread for all the returning exiles, and then God blesses them. So they went through a bunch of harsh times, but eventually God blessed them. So that's kind of like how it is today. If you may be going through some very difficult trials in your life, but in the end, if you stay faithful to God and know that He will take care of you and you trust that, then He will bless you. And so that's pretty much it for today. In the next episode, I'll probably read through chapter 7. It's whatever God tells me to read to y'all. He's just been really telling me to read Ezra, but whatever He tells me to read next is what we'll be reading. But I have a feeling it's probably going to be Ezra, because that's what He keeps telling me. But anyways, I hope y'all have a good day. I'm about to go to church camp, and I don't know that I'm going to make a video for a couple of days, but I might bring my stuff down there just to try and figure out a video to make. I might make a Bible study, or I might do some interviews with the kids at camp. But anyways, that was Ezra chapter 5 and 6. I hope y'all have a great day. Peace.